much. The last word in the introductory exposition is given to André. André is, you correct me if I'm wrong, chairman of Les Echos, of the supervisory board, vice chairman of the supervisory board of Rothschild and Company, former chairman and CEO of Banque Paribas, and you're also in a very great number of non-profit where I could see that you are particularly active. So, André, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Jean-Claude. I would like to take the micro approach and say a few words on the impact of the new environment on the financial institutions, especially in Europe, and the way that they fund the real economy. As John Lipsky mentioned, we've had an avalanche of regulations since 2008, and still it is probably incomplete. The point I would like to stress first is that we do not have an even playing field, obviously, briefly because the US has really restored the health of this banking system. In Europe, there's a variety of situations. In France, the banking system is in very good health, but there are countries in which it's not clearly the case. So that's the first point. The second point is that, as you probably know, the European economy, especially the continental one, is funded up to 70 to 80% by banks, bank credit, and the rest is the market. In the US, it's the reverse. So banking credit is extremely important. Now, what is the substance of these new regulations? First, leverage, reduce leverage, more equity. Two, reduce transformation, borrowing short to lend longer term. And three, to specific investments are specially penalized in terms of equity requirements, especially stocks. So the consequences, several consequences. First, banking credit is more expensive by structure for that reason. Second, banks and insurance companies are no longer active players in capital markets, and they used to be one of the stabilizing forces in capital markets. So that leads to my first comment or worry, which is the liquidity of capital markets. We have very volatile environments, as we all know, and there is a huge amount of liquidity supposedly around because of the policy of the central banks, but it doesn't show clearly on the capital markets. Now, in the case of the bond market, the impression, I'm sure it cannot be official position, the impression is that the central banks do play a role in watching the bond markets. I guess the recent reaction to the Brexit or to Trump's election was a proof that there was no major reaction on the bond market. On the equity market, the situation is different. First of all, there is huge concentration of investors. The number for BlackRock is 5 trillion euros, the largest fund manager in the world. A second less known problem is the role of exchange-traded funds, so-called trackers. These are ways to invest in indices, a variety of indices, at a very low price. But trackers are managed by investment banks, by definition, two things. First, they have to buy and sell on the markets, and therefore they are, I believe, pro-cyclical instruments. By the way, the amount of trackers outstanding today, or recently, was over 3 trillion euros again, huge number. And second point, they do not play the role you would expect in terms of company governance, because the investors are not interested in the companies. So one of the functions of the capital market as a monitor of governance doesn't work anymore. So I am worried about that side of it. Now come back to Europe and to the banking sector. One of the problems we have is that the European Banking Authority has been a very good student of the rules too good, I believe, student of the rules set up by Basel and by the Council for Financial Stability. And they have tried to be overreacting. So we are in a number of areas, I believe that we have gone too far. There was a question recently on Italy with the famous bail-in question when there is a problem. So, to complete this side of my introduction, I believe that European banks globally suffer from a suspicion on their health, which again in some cases may be justified, but in many cases it's not justified. And I think one of the key issues we have today is to restore this faith and find ways not to be too strict, too orthodox, let's put it this way, in the way we do it, because clearly it is very important for the real economy to do it. I do believe also that completing the plan for European banks within the ECB is very important and has to be done. It's still not complete. One final point, which I think is a small element of optimism. I find that there is a fantastic degree of interest and development in startups in Europe, especially in France, which is new, which I hope will be helped if we have a new government which removes some of the obstacles from a tax standpoint. And especially in the area of finance, there is a growth of the so-called fintech companies, startups, which is very encouraging because it means that there will be, and there are already gains in productivity in this whole sector, which I'm sure can use them. I guess I'm under the 8 minutes, Jean-Claude.